Hello, my name's Olurotimi Osha. It's July the 22nd, 2026, and today I'm going to be sifting through the complicated trajectory of US presidential annals. One president destroyed the Ku Klux Klan. That's President Ulysses S. Grant, who was our 18th president, with the Ku Klux Klan Act of 1871. The first iteration of the KKK was destroyed, and another president is said to have joined the KKK, the Ku Klux Klan, and that's our 33rd president, President Harry S. Truman. So today I'm going to be discussing President Truman. I'm not going to do a deep dive into his biography today, but I'm just going to talk about certain aspects. So Harry Truman was a complicated man. He's quite complex, and it did come out during one of his one of these presidential contests against a renowned um, opponent. That was Thomas Dewey, who was former governor of New York. If anybody recalls, Thomas Dewey was the prosecutor, was once a prosecutor who actually put away Lucky Luciano, who was known as the capo di tutti capi of the mafia. That's boss of all bosses. He put him away, for basically the rest of his life. And I've done a video in which, through a deal with the U.S. government, in which Lucky Luciano would help the U.S. Navy land, in Italy, or was it of the coast of Sicily anyway, in 19 during the Second World War. Al Capone was subsequently released and deported for life to Italy, but that was a bit of a sidebar. But in any event, uh, our 33rd president, Harry Truman, did join the Ku Klux Klan, according to Thomas Dewey. Thomas Dewey claimed that Harry Truman did take the KKK oath. Um, Harry Truman, of course, he refuted this, right? He refuted this, denied it, that he ever took an oath to the KKK. But he did acknowledge that he did pay the membership fees. So he paid a $10 membership fees at a Kansas City hotel. This was in 1922 when he was running for county judge of Missouri, right? He was running for county judge of Missouri, and he acknowledged paying the $10 membership fee, and that he was flirting with the idea of being a full-fledged member of the Ku Klux Klan. Of course, back then the Ku Klux Klan was was pervasive, very prominent, and they controlled politics in the South, in the Deep South, in the South at that time, and people who had political aspirations, they felt they had no other alternative than to join the KKK. Um, I have an excerpt I want to read just to give us an idea of what was going on, back then in the 1920s, because a prominent United States Supreme Court Justice, Hugo Black, was known to have been a member of the KKK. Um, so Hugo Black, in his biography, acknowledges, and I'm just going to quote from him just to give us an idea of why Harry Truman, felt the need to join the KKK, and if as he claimed, he said, that he was just flirting with the idea of joining the KKK, and he did pay the membership fee. However, it is said that he asked for, a refund of his membership fee. Where after they asked him, they gave as a stipulation, a condition, right, of joining, that once they helped him become county judge, that he would exclude Catholics, right? He would exclude Catholics from his administration, right? And because he had some relatives who were Catholics. He refused to accede to this, and asked for his membership fee back. But later on, he went on to renounce the KKK. But in any event, he did pay the membership fee, the $10 membership fee, and he did meet with the Klan organization in a Kansas City hotel. And his opponent, like I said, Thomas Dewey, claimed that he in fact took an oath to the KKK. But again, I want to just provide context on the sort of pressure that people who had political ambitions felt in the South to join the KKK, even if they didn't necessarily believe in they didn't share their vile hatred and animosity towards minorities, and or share their creed. So this is an excerpt from Justice Hugo Black. Justice Hugo Black is significant. Like I said, he was on the Supreme Court, and importantly, he was one of those justices who voted unanimously for Brown versus Board of Education, striking down segregation, right? So that was in 1954, and that was the law that led to the unraveling of Jim Crow laws, and it ushered in later anti-discrimination laws that guaranteeing and protecting the equal rights of black people. So this is an excerpt from Justice Hugo Black in his biography. I quote, "At that time, I was joining every organization in sight. In my part of Alabama, the Klan was engaged in unlawful activities. The general feeling in the community was that if responsible citizens didn't join the Klan, it would soon become dominated by the less responsible members." So this is the reason, the justification that Hugo Black provides in his biography for joining the Ku Klux Klan. And we can imagine that Harry Truman had similar motivations, right, for joining the Ku Klux Klan. Again, it was while he was running for county judge. It's interesting that Harry Truman did serve as a county judge, right, in Missouri, but he never had a law degree. And he is the last U.S. president who not to have a formal college degree. He never possessed a college degree. And he's the only president since William McKinley, who himself was a lawyer, right? He was a trained lawyer. So Harry Truman is the only president since William McKinley not to possess a college degree. But it's interesting, he was a lawyer, right? By this time, law schools had been established. Harry Truman's life is kind of interesting. He was a bookworm, and while psychohistorians, right, those who sort of impute a putative IQ score to past U.S. presidents based on their accomplishments and their lives, they attribute one of the lowest IQs to Harry Truman. But again, virtually all U.S. presidents, were in the intelligent range, right? But Harry Truman had one of the lowest. Is typically given one of the lowest IQs amongst all U.S. presidents, right? I think in the bottom four, thereabout, right? The bottom three. Of course, those IQ tests, but have to be taken with a grain of salt, right? But especially considering that he never did take an IQ test. But his life was, he did demonstrate a lack of follow through, right, throughout his life. I mentioned that he became a county judge, even though he didn't have a law degree. But he attended law classes for about 2 years. He attended night classes for about 2 years. He dropped out. He didn't complete it. He attended undergraduate for about 1 year. He dropped out as well. So in his private life, in the private sector, he lacked follow through, right? So he was the son of a farmer and in Missouri, and he failed in several business attempts, right? He didn't do well in several businesses he tried. He was a haberdasher. A haberdasher is someone who sells men's clothing, right? It could be buttons, men's clothing. That's what a haberdasher is. And so he tried different business ventures in the private sector, but they all failed. But Harry Truman is typically ranked as one of our most effective presidents. So he did do pretty well in the private sector. Now, with regard to his lack of follow through, he ran for county judge, and he was elected. Right, he was elected as a county judge. Now, by the way, a county judge, the sort of county judge that he ran as, was as an administrative judge. So sometimes you find them even still in some counties we have in America, right? In Montgomery County, they have people they call commissioners, right? They're commissioners, and they do some administrative tasks of judges, right? But they're not judicial judges. They're not Article 3 judges. So he did serve as a county judge, and it was while he was running as a county judge that he started to flirt with the Ku Klux Klan, and he paid the $10 fee so he could be successful and win his seat. At some point, he applied for a law license, right? You could apply. So I guess the laws back then in the state of Missouri was that if he had sufficient experience, he could apply for a law license. And because he worked as a county judge for several years, and he had attended some night classes for law, even though he didn't get a formal degree in law, he was told that he met the experience requirement to obtain a law license. So while he was president, sometime in 1947, he sent in his application, but he didn't follow through. In 1996, however, the Missouri Supreme Court saw his application and decided to award him a posthumous honorary law license. So kind of interesting, right? So he got a law license after his death, right? So it's Harry Truman's story, kind of interesting. But I will do another video and talk about other aspects of Harry Truman. But that's the context, the background with respect to why Harry Truman joined the Ku Klux Klan. My name is Olurotimi Osha, and I will keep you posted. Thank you.